How should people leaders prepare for and react to a workplace crisis? What types of workplace crises should you prepare for? Join us for this crucial conversation with Lisa Lishman and Angie Clayson, two HR leaders from Utah State University.
Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture Profit Podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Mobrium, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com. All right, welcome everyone to the Culture Profit Podcast. Today, you'll notice I'm here running solo by myself without Krista, our co-host, and my wife. She's just prepping to go down to Salt Lake and take our recently born son to a doctor's appointment. So I'm here, but I'm welcomed and sharing the stage here with two exceptional professionals, Lisa and Angie, who we'll introduce here in a moment. But to kick off the episode, as difficult as tragedies can be, they are an unavoidable part of life. This topic hits close to home for me, especially with our son that was recently born with a lot of challenges. And in fact, Lisa and Angie were so gracious to rearrange some things with the recording of this podcast and the timing there. So, they're living what they're preaching here. So you can definitely trust what they have to say on the topic. So how should a company respond when a tragedy impacts a team member or the workplace as a whole? Joining us today is Lisa Lishman and Angie Clayson from Utah State University, who both have a wealth of experience in this area. So thank you both for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and read some of the background for Lisa and Angie. So Lisa Lishman is a passionate HR professional with a wealth of experience both in the public and private sectors, where she directed USU's Parking and Transportation Division and led HR at ELITechGroup. As a graduate of Utah State University, receiving a bachelor's in arts and marketing and a master's of science in human resources, Lisa later became the program administrator for the MHR program. And I actually had a class from Lisa when I was attending USU, which was really my very first intro to HR. And I have you to thank for putting a good taste in my mouth for this very important profession for sure. Today, Lisa is the Associate Director of Benefits within USU's Office of Human Resources. Lisa has 4 children and 1 beautiful granddaughter. So thanks again for being here, Lisa.
Thank you, Matt, for having me.
And then Angie Clayson began her career in HR at the Sinclair Corporation, where she focused on recruiting and talent acquisition. She was then recruited to Savage Services, where she broadened her HR expertise with employee benefits administration. Later, she was recruited again to lead employee benefit administration for Salt Lake's most prestigious Grand America Hotel. As an Aggie alumni, Angie had the chance of a lifetime to move back to her hometown, Cache Valley, and take the role of benefits supervisor in the Office of Human Resources at Utah State University. She loves making benefits more accessible and user-friendly for both employers and employees with a focus on mental health. Angie has 1 beautiful teenage daughter who brings her immense joy. So thank you for joining us, Angie.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So let's dive right into the topic. It's a little bit of a harder topic at times, tragedies, hard things that are happening in individuals' lives and in the workplace. But let's kind of set the stage for the conversation with this first question. What would you define as a tragedy?
So a tragedy is an event that causes great suffering and distress. This could be events that impact one individual or a large-scale tragedy impacting a community, such as a pandemic, which was worldwide, or a war. There are many types of tragedies, from the employee whose partner has lost a job and they are looking at eviction, the employee who experienced a miscarriage, the employee who is balancing caring for their family and their parents, that sandwich generation. Maybe you have an employee whose child is suicidal. The employee has a family in an area of the world impacted by war. How an employee defines a tragedy will be very individualized. You and your lovely wife are going through a stress moment right now, and that could be defined in your world as a tragedy. So what we need to do in HR is be prepared to support those employees, but it can be very broad on how we support those employees.
That makes a lot of sense. And I do agree that tragedies can take a lot of forms and they can manifest in individuals' behaviors differently as well. Like they could be turning inward or self-harm or lots of different manifestations of those hard things that come up. So USU as an organization, Utah State University, was founded in 1888, long time ago. Now, fast forward to today, 2023, there are over 10,000 employees, staff, and faculty throughout the state of Utah. That's a lot of history, a lot of data around experiences that could have come up in the realm of tragedies. Without sharing specific details, what types of tragedies are impacting the workplace?
I already mentioned several of tragedies that impact people's ability to be successful in their job and be able to work well in their position. Again, many tragedies are happening worldwide. We have wars, floods, fires, famine. We had the pandemic. And although they're not happening in our backyard, they really have an impact on our overall well-being. We have a very diverse workforce at Utah State. So we have employees who have family members that are directly impacted by many of these tragedies. Employees are struggling with coping of really what is happening in the world, having to do more with less. As an employer, we're just like everyone else. Employees are having to do more with less. They're overloaded. They're trying to balance family and work. And our employees' mental health is really impacted by this. We're so grateful that the negative stigma around mental health has decreased over time, and people are more willing to talk about their mental health and how we are coping. We often talk in HR about our therapy sessions and who we're seeing, and can we recommend somebody for a coworker to visit with. It's very open. It's a very open discussion about the mental health treatments that we or our family members are receiving. But mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It really affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and what type of choices we make regarding our health. But we view at USU that mental and physical health are equal components of our overall health. If somebody is depressed, that increases their risk for many types of health problems, diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. And then if you have those chronic conditions, it can increase your risk of mental illness. So I could go on and on about the tragedies that are impacting the workplace, but I'll just leave it at that for now.
That sounds great. And there are a lot of different things to consider for sure. I'm glad and appreciate that you brought up mental health, because I know it is tied to a lot of the different tragedies that are coming up today. So can you tell us a little bit more about what USU has done specifically to help employees struggling with mental health?
Absolutely. Great question. Even prior to COVID, our office, the Office of Human Resources, recognized there was a need to provide mental health resources to our faculty and staff. Utah State had done very well to initiate mental health programs and resources for students. But we felt the resources for our employees was lacking. And I distinctly remember a conversation I was having one day with Angie Clayson about this. And once she got the green light to implement a mental health initiative, she ran with it. And since its inception, it's called Aggie's Thrive. I'll have her talk about it. It's helped so many employees with their or their family members' mental health. So Angie, you want to talk about your program and what you did to help our faculty and staff?
Yeah, I'd love to. So as Lisa mentioned, Aggie's Thrive was this mental health initiative that we decided was really important to get out to our employees. There was a couple of things that we were hoping that the Aggie's Thrive initiative would do. The first one was kind of gather all the available resources to our employees and have them in one location. So we created the website to provide a one-stop place where employees can learn about the university's employee assistance program, what resources they have through their medical plan, what community resources are available to them in the community that they live, and that's throughout the state of Utah, right? And what on-campus resources are available to them as well. And so it connects them to material and webinars all around mental health education and support. We want those employees who are experiencing a tragedy to be able to think when they start going through this tragedy, where Aggie's Thrive is my resource, and that's where I need to go to kind of get connected to available resources to me. So hopefully minimizing those stresses that they're experiencing at that time as much as we can.
What's been the response, Angie, from USU staff to Aggie Thrive?
Oh, so positive. When we rolled this out, our vice president and Lisa got multiple emails saying, thank you so much. We needed this. We needed resources. We needed to be connected. And it continues because we've added things to this program as time's gone. We celebrate World Mental Health Day and have a whole day of activities around education and whether it's, again, on-campus resources. We have a music therapy department, so we're letting them know about that, art therapy, all these types of things. And we're regularly getting positive feedback about what it's doing for our employees, providing to our employees. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The other thing that we were hoping that the Aggie's Thrive would do is, again, building that supportive culture around mental health. So we're, as Lisa mentioned, trying to continue to remove that stigmatism, around mental health, and that it's just part of our normal total well-being that we need to focus on. So many of us nowadays are impacted one way or another around mental health, and we don't want there to be any shame around saying, life's gotten hard. I'm going through some depression. I'm seeing a counselor, taking medication. That's no different than, I have diabetes and I'm going to a doctor and I take medication. Mm-hmm. So that was another area of Aggie's Thrive that we wanted to support, build this culture around mental health support. And then in addition to that, it also provides resources to the supervisors. A lot of times our frontline supervisors are the first ones experiencing and dealing with their employees' tragedies and their stressors. And so it provides them some information, education. It lets them know about mental health first aid training that we have provided to supervisors too, so they can kind of help recognize when employees are experiencing some mental health challenges. So that's another area that we've brought to our community's attention with the Aggie's Thrive website.
So Angie, this, I guess the way that I'm hearing this, the Aggie Thrive program is essentially institutionalized individual care. It's a way for the large organization with 10,000 people to help individuals. And I think it's key that a program like this has resources for those supervisors like USU does, because they're the person that has that interpersonal connection, the highest, amount of FaceTime and direct contact with each team member. And so having that layer of support built into a program like this I think is phenomenal. So I've got a follow-up question. Well, first of all, how long ago was Aggie Thrive launched? How many years has it been?
July, you correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but July of 2020, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was,
Or July of 2019.
no, I started in 2019. And
Oh,
you'll-
yeah,
You'll
2020.
edit this out, Matt.
2020.
It
Okay.
was July of 2020, right?
So we have over 3 years of history of the program existing. So how does USU, number one, measure success of individual components of Aggie Thrive? And two, how are they informing change of, like, maybe they need to make some additions or add something or, enhance something of, one area of the program? So how are you measuring success, and how are you making change to the overall program?
We get a report each month from our employee assistance program, which is one of the primary resources within Aggie's Thrive. And we're anywhere from 8 to 10% utilization with our employees assistance program, which includes 6 free visits for someone that is struggling, regardless of what they're struggling with, whether it's family, work. It's really whatever they're struggling with. They get 6 free visits per issue per year. And that can be face-to-face. That can be over the phone. That can be through teleconferencing. And so we make it convenient. And like I say, we're about anywhere from 7 to 10% utilization, which means 1 in 10 of our employees are seeking out that service.
That's really high, honestly. I just Googled what's the average EAP usage.
Yep.
3 to 5%
Yeah.
is average. So you're more than double, which means people know about it and those who need it are using it. That's honestly phenomenal.
We put it into our training. So, I do some training for leaders and I review Aggie's Thrive. So we definitely are trying to get the word out about Aggie's Thrive as much and as often as we can.
Cool.
So, and the one thing I would add to what Lisa said too is, before we had our Aggie's Thrive initiative, our EAP was kind of the bare bones product that came with our life insurance. And so part of our leadership approved purchasing a larger product of the EAP, which provided us the data analytics that we were hoping to get with to see what the need was and the utilization was with that.
Amazing. Well, that's very powerful to have that information to help inform next steps. So it can be this continuous innovation of care for the individuals in the organization. So let's maybe talk about an example here. Obviously, we don't need to go into specifics, but how does USU respond to a tragedy? Let's say there's a death or, some other really large problem or tragedy. What happens? Like, what happens immediately after the news is announced?
Well, sadly, in June of 2022, we received the devastating news that we had a plane crash that occurred here in Cache Valley, and it killed an instructor and a student within the aviation program. Maybe you saw this on the news. We had quick action from our critical incident team. We immediately called in a specialist. This is another service that our employee assistance program offers. So it happened on a Friday, and on Monday morning, we had a group meeting with the aviation students and faculty and staff, anyone who wanted to be there really. And then they offered to meet with individuals one-on-one, those that were struggling individually, to talk about them, to give them resources, to help them cope with such a big tragedy. And then we offered continued support. We checked in with the department head on a regular basis, seeing how that person was doing, how the students were doing. And this was big. I mean, thank goodness things like this don't happen every day, but individual tragedies are more common. I remember walking into work one day in my previous job, and I learned about death of an employee, and there was no plan in place, and nobody knew really what to do. And it was then that I vowed that I was never going to let that happen again. So as Angie's talked about, we feel very equipped with information available to employees, to supervisors through our EAP, our Employee Assistance Program, and ready to be disseminated when we hear about these types of tragedies. So we send information to supervisors, things like coping with an unexpected death, or tips for announcing an employee death to other employees, tips for delegating their tasks after an employee death, just important things that a supervisor needs to be able to manage this. So we give them the resources. And then, of course, our employee assistance information, how to let people know to reach out when they need that help. Angie, do you want to take some, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah. So I feel like COVID really helped us in the fact that we created kind of this critical incident committee, because what it did, I mean, the university is large, right? As you've mentioned, and we're decentralized, we're all over the state. And so sometimes different departments can become siloed and forget about all the various areas that need to be notified. And so that really helped, in my opinion, create good communication between these different departments that needed to take different aspects of these tragedies and from what they handle and manage those situations. And so I feel like that really helped, having that committee, because now when something happens, they know to get out to the community members, and those leaders get out to their teams. And so it's pretty quick reaction to any sort of tragedy, whether it's individual or on a larger scale. The other thing I would add, kind of going back to what you said, is it is very individualized. So we do everything we can to, especially when it's an individual tragedy, remove as many barriers as we can for that employee or family members who have experienced a loss. You know, for instance, the life insurance claims, we try and fill all of that out for the employee. We don't just give them a form and say, here, go to it.
Wow.
We're filling it out for them. We're sitting down with them. We're reviewing it, and so they understand it and they're signing it. But we're removing as many steps and barriers as we can to each process.
That's phenomenal, to step in and do as much as you can to relieve the stress and tension that an individual is having in that moment of crisis. I think that's phenomenal. And having a critical incident committee that meets before something happens to dialogue through what happens in this type of a scenario or this type of a scenario, I think can help an organization be more prepared, which is critical, because if you're not ready for that moment, then there's so much more room for handling something in a way that can damage the experience of other people at the organization. And we want it to be a moment of healing, community grieving when appropriate based on the tragedy, and helping everyone come together in a positive way so that everyone can move forward in a unified method. So I think that's great. As far as like tips for other listeners, you know, we've got HR leaders and people leaders that are tuning in. What are the top 3 things a company should do to prepare for a tragedy right now before something happens?
Great question. It's just like we've been talking about. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And companies need to be prepared. So the first thing I would say is develop a committee of key players, and every organization is different. And so what that committee looks like is going to be different. It may be 2 people, it may be 10 people. At USU, that committee, it's called the Threat Assessment Management Team. And so we have administrators from public safety, human resources, legal, administration, Office of Equity, in our case, student services. Of course, you may not have that type of organization.
Mhm.
That will be unique. So the second thing is to look for those potential risks and make sure everyone on the committee understands what their role is when the tragedy occurs. We have individuals that are experts in psychology, and they will go in and talk with people, students, faculty, staff, whoever it is, and just be the person that they talk with and work through the tragedy right after it occurs. Angie, any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I feel like being prepared for a tragedy is overall going to help your engagement, your retention, your recruitment, right? Employees going through a tragedy, I mean, this is something they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. And they're going to also remember their employer's response to that. And so, and they communicate to their coworkers. So their coworkers will remember the company's response to the tragedy too. And so I feel like those are really important reasons of why being prepared for a tragedy is so important. You know, I've seen firsthand in previous experience that having a kind of an obtuse response to what was a very big personal tragedy to an employee cost them, the employee, and cost the morale of the team too, by seeing that response. And so even if employees don't see an employer's response to a tragedy, they'll hear about it from a coworker. And on top of that, you know, it's doing the right thing, right? We're humans helping humans. And so being prepared to be responsive to employees is what every company should be prepared to do.
So Matt, going back to your question, I think the top three things are involve the right players, have a committee, whatever you call it, a group ready to respond. Look at the potential risks of where tragedies could occur, whether they're company-wide or individualistic. And then when a tragedy happens, respond. Don't be flippant about it. Respond with seriousness and have those resources available so you can communicate and make sure the tragedy is dealt with effectively and efficiently.
I think those are great tips, and every organization should evaluate their current situation if they need to make enhancements, or if they're making this for their preparations for the first time. Maybe you're a newer or smaller organization and this is the first time considering this, but those are three incredible tips. And I think going off of what you had mentioned, Angie, that everyone remembers, you know, they remember the crisis, they remember the tragedy, and they remember the response of the coworker or of the company and of their coworkers and other team members. And that's a moment that can propel you forward or can really damage not just the productivity of your organization, but profitability, as you lose employees who may be, dissuaded by the way that you handled a situation, and now they're looking elsewhere, or maybe they quiet quit. You know, we've seen that term mentioned of, now I'm just going to do the bare minimum because I feel this company doesn't care for me as a person, because they didn't care for so-and-so that had this tragedy. And honestly, with review sites like Glassdoor and Indeed and other places where people can research what it's like to work at a company, you have to realize that so much is open and transparent in today's workplace. And it's better to embrace that, to own the situation and to respond seriously, as you had said, Lisa, with the right resources. And I think these are some great recommendations that you've given. So we're about at time now. Before we wrap up, are there any other final thoughts or recommendations, advice that either of you would like to share?
My experience has a few times when there is a tragedy, a personal tragedy of an employee, is sometimes too much information is shared. I'm an open book, and so a lot of people know about my world, but not everybody's like that, and we have to respect that. And so as supervisors, be mindful of your employees, be respectful, and maybe share limited information, and let the employee be the one to share anything that they feel others need to know about. And learn from it, though. I mean, maybe you've done it already. Learn from it and help for the next time it happens. Again, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, to be better prepared for the next type of tragedy.
Great advice,
Do
Lisa.
you have anything?
I mean, yeah, just adding to that, we're all humans, we make mistakes. So if the process isn't perfect and you hear back from an employee that, hey, you really dropped the ball in this area, it's just your opportunity to make the process better. So you just own up to where we fail and improve for the next time.
I love that. I've always believed that feedback is a gift, even if it comes with a poop emoji, right? Like that's your chance to improve. So, that's it. I'm in the world of feedback, and it really is the critical feedback that helps you make changes to become better. And it's great to hear the nice things of what went well, but welcome that all types of feedback so you can move forward. I think that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Angie, for being here with us today. For everyone that's tuning in, thanks for listening. Make sure to follow along with us at The Culture Prophet on social media, on LinkedIn and YouTube. And then we'll have links for both Lisa and Angie. So if you want to connect with them and follow them, we'll have that on the highlight article as well. So thank you, and we'll see you later.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Prophet podcast and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mobrium.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mobrium.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.